Hello, good morning. Hi, everybody. Let's make sure that, yep, looks like we got sound and video. Good morning. Hello, this is Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. And I thought I would do a bonus live stream this week because a few things have happened in the last 48 hours that have been a little eye opening and interesting in the world of Scientology. And so here I was wondering what I was going to talk about this week, and this stuff kind of landed on the news cycle. And there's three things that we'll talk about here in the show. Hey, everybody. Good. Just want to check in with everybody on the comments. I'll be looking in on those as we go. Um, good. Hey, New Zealand. Hey, Oregon. You guys are awesome. And welcome to my live stream. Uh, yeah, that's true. He almost did get run over by a Runner did almost get run over by a steam locomotive on Venus. That is true. Or so he said, so it must be true. All right, guys. So folks are coming on board here, so we are good to go. So let me just actually reset that so I have a nice clean. Yep, there we go. Okay, everybody. Tom Cruise phoning in from my jet, Scotland. Okay, we have an international audience. It's so awesome. Um, okay, so lots to talk about. First thing, and I pulled a lot of quotes and stuff from Hubbard Materials about medicine, medical handling, stuff like that, because I thought that would be the bulk of what we were going to end up talking about today. And then this morning, Tony Ortega posted on his blog that Brian Seymour's 10-part series on Scientology Black Ops or Black Operations, which you guys who have followed my work know, that's a pretty deep well as far as how down will Scientology, how low will Scientology go in order to engage in, tarnishing the good name and reputation of people who speak out against it. Well, they'll go as far as they have to. And this 10-part series was going to expose what appeared from the trailer to be what kind of black op they were running on director Paul Haggis. He's an Oscar-winning director and screenplay writer. And he also contributed to Walker, Texas Ranger, which didn't impress me too much on his resume, but I think he was a producer on that old show. But he has produced some really amazing work, and he was a Scientologist. And of course, as you know, from watching Scientology in the aftermath, and from reading The Apostate and what became Going Clear, the book and documentary, you know that Paul Haggis was at the center of a lot of nonsense, and that after all that went out, he was then accused of sexual improprieties, and that is still an ongoing thing. I'm not going to comment on that except to say that, there's a lot up in the air about that because you have a very, very realistic situation of Scientology, a professional black ops outfit. They have a division of their church, which I've done podcasts and shows about here on this channel, about how they will try to destroy you. And so, could it be possible that Scientology could have something to do with these accusations against Paul Haggis? Yeah, of course it's possible that that could be that way. Is it a certainty? No, I can't sit here and say one way or the other. But is it possible? Goddamn right it's possible. Of course it is. And that's exactly the kind of thing that they would, do or try to help make happen in order to ruin utterly their critics. Okay. Hey, wow. NB Singh says, I escaped Scientology after watching your video. I was there for 4 years. You're very welcome. That's awesome, man. All right. And yeah, so we're gonna get to Kelly Preston, and yeah, in fact, we're gonna get to her pretty fast here. I just wanted to comment on this. What happened was this 10-part series that Brian Seymour had put together for Australia and ABC News has been yanked, and according to Tony, we have no explanation yet as to why. given the fact that, there could be a few different reasons. I mean, we could assume Scientology's legal arm went into full blown, assault against Australian TV, and said that they would scorch the earth with their broadcast station or something. Could have been a number of that could be one reason. It could have been a legal reason as to why they pulled the episode. It could also be that, given the fact that John Travolta's wife, Kelly Preston, just died, which we will be talking about in detail, um, that they thought, it was supposed to start airing today. So maybe they thought, well, let's give it a little bit of space or room, because John Travolta is spoken of fairly derogatorily in this series. Now, this is all according to the trailer. I have no inside information on this news set, okay, on this 10-part series. So my conjecture is really as good as yours, but it could well be that they decided, oh, too soon. Oh my God, we're going to make John Travolta look like a dick when his wife just died of cancer, and that would just make us look awful. And so, oh, hey, thanks, Cynthia. Thank you for that super chat. So it's entirely possible that that's why they're just delaying it. But you'd think that they would have put some kind of date up or something. But who knows? Maybe they just went, oh, we can't show this now. And somebody in PR or something just went like, oh my God, this would be crazy. We can't do that. And so they're just delaying it. Maybe it will eventually air. I certainly hope so. I mean, Leah and Mike Rinder are in this episode. Of course, Paul is interviewed, it looks like, pretty extensively. And anyway, it might be that it will air. And I certainly hope it does. But, if it was Scientology's shenanigans that were behind all of this, then we might not ever see it. It's a real shame, because there's shows that there was a show I was part of. I think it was a 6 or 8 part series that never saw the light of day, that I was very, very happy to be on, and I thought it was going to have legs, and it was being produced around the same time as Scientology in the Aftermath, and for whatever reason, it never got picked up and aired like Scientology in the Aftermath did, and that really sucked, because a lot of people would put a lot of work into that show. So there are other reasons than just Scientology's lawyers for these things not airing, although in this case, clearly with the 10-part series I'm talking about now, that was going to be Brian Seymour's show, that was cleared. They got legal clearance, they had everything, it was set, it was going to air, and then they pulled it. So that's pretty unusual. So I guess we'll find out as more data comes out. That's the thing about these immediate news articles and items, is you never really do know exactly what's going on, and everybody's sure they've got, their conjecture must be right. And I'm just saying, I don't know, but we'll see. Oh, yeah, somebody's mentioning here, Kelly Preston died. Yes, Kelly Preston died. John Travolta's wife died 48 hours ago on Sunday. She succumbed to breast cancer. This was the first that any of us had been hearing about this or had known anything about it. It was a real, rude shock, a tragedy, to be sure. This is the second familial loss that John Travolta has suffered. His son Jet died many years ago, and now his wife Kelly at 57 years old, far too young, and a beautiful woman, a talented actress, and somebody who definitely will be missed. And there are memorials and articles running today in the media about John and Kelly and their love story and all of that. And I happen to, and I guess I'll just throw it out there, since it's I guess appropriate or timely or whatever, that I was a staff member back in the day in Santa Barbara, California, for the Church of Scientology from 1987 to 1995. And during that time, John Travolta was somebody who would come around the Santa Barbara org very infrequently, but he had a staff contact there. And this was one of the people who had been named by L. Ron Hubbard directly to be able to work with and on John Travolta. There was a special issue put out of, these are the people by name who get to work with John. And one of the Santa Barbara staff was one of those people. I forget exactly how that happened, but it happened. I walked into it and it was already there. And so when John met Kelly for the first time and was getting her into Scientology and getting her interested in it, she came to Santa Barbara and, in fact, got some of her first Scientology auditing, I believe, there in Santa Barbara from this staff member. And so I met her once, sitting on the couch there waiting to go into a session. And she was gorgeous and very, very sweet, very nice woman. And this was, I don't know, 89, 90. I mean, this was quite a while ago. I think they got married in 1991, and this is before they had gotten married. So anyway, yeah, she, according to, I think somebody's asking if she was OT8. I believe OT7 for sure, possibly got up through 8. I know Tony, I think in 2014, published an article that she had been giving her success on OT7, if I remember that right. But yeah, definitely at the top of the bridge. And I don't know exactly where John's at. I know he got up through OT5 for sure. I don't know if he finished 7 or 8. But when you get up to that level of the bridge, the way you get audited and the things that are being addressed in your auditing is pretty same. There's a lot of ways to attack the problem of body thetans. But the number one problem that you're dealing with on the OT levels, especially from OT3 on up, is body thetans. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, I'm not going to explain it all here today. That's not the point of this live stream. But body thetans are, well, they're sort of your oh, I'm seeing a pretty clear image here. Somebody's saying, is the live stream blurry for anyone else? If I'm no, I'm looking at the live stream here. I'm pretty clear. Okay, anyway, so body thetans are like your space cooties. They're actual spiritual entities that are stuck to your body, and you use the auditing procedures of Scientology at the confidential upper levels to get rid of these body thetans that are kind of glommed onto you. Okay, and that's the summary explanation. There's a lot more to know about it, but and like I said, I'm not going to get into all that. Okay, good. Body thetans gave me gonorrhea. Jesus, guys. Okay, good. So some of these comments. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now that we've sort of talked about the Brian Seymour thing, and I've said about as much as I can about it, except that, of course, I am the last thing I think I want to end off with on that Brian Seymour 10-part stream was we're all pretty pissed. I mean, I have talked to a couple other, people involved, and we're not happy about this. It's fucking disgusting. I mean, regardless of why it was pulled, we don't agree with any of it. I don't really care about John Travolta's hurt feelings in terms of him being lambasted for being a Scientologist. The timing is unfortunate for sure, and I definitely feel for the man for his loss. I want to be clear that these are two separate things. John Travolta, the Scientologist, John Travolta, the husband and family man. I feel very sorry for him for his loss. It sucks to lose a loved one, as especially early like that. So I feel for him as a human being. As a Scientologist, no mercy. The man supports human rights atrocities and abuses by supporting and endorsing and promoting the Church of Scientology. So to be super, super clear, yes, I can feel both things at the same time. I think it's the humane thing to do, to feel compassion and sympathy for somebody who suffers a deep emotional loss. And yet at the same time, while John Travolta, I've met him, I've interacted with him. He is a nice man when you interact with him in person. But what he is supporting is unsupportable and indefensible. And he really needs to wake the fuck up about that. And maybe this event, this unfortunate tragedy in his life, will open his eyes, and maybe it won't. It's real hard to say when it comes to how people resolve their cognitive dissonance and where they go when they are in pain. It's hard. It's a hard situation. Yeah. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually start talking about this medical stuff, because this comes up a lot. And it's a complicated topic. I pulled some quotes and stuff because everybody is both right and wrong at the same time about how Scientology deals with medical issues and and medical problems and disease and stuff. And they're both right and wrong because there's contradictory information in Scientology. So you get this and then you get this. Oh, hey Mark, welcome to my live stream. Um, so you get, so depending on what time period and where you're looking in Scientology as to what Hubbard had to say about cancer, physically ill people, terminally ill people, serious physical disease or illness. Depending on when and where you're looking, you're going to find different messaging in Scientology's materials. And this is why it makes it, it's difficult to walk away with a well-rounded, coherent, integrated view of all of this stuff, because it's not a well-rounded, integrated, view. It's very contradictory. And so I thought what we might spend some time doing today is pulling from the scriptures of Scientology, of Dianetics and Scientology, in fact. And I pulled a bunch of stuff this morning to kind of walk through a timeline of Hubbard quotes on this matter. What I want to do with this is not necessarily harp on the situation with Kelly. And by the way, the third thing we'll talk about briefly at the end is Lisa Marie's son, Benjamin Keough, also died this weekend. He suicided. He was 27 years old. That was also a tragedy for the Presley family. My heart really goes out to them. It's never a good thing, or, that kind of loss, that kind of unexpected loss. And Scientology, I'm not going to say Scientology is responsible for that suicide. I have no idea. But I will give some comments about the general subject of depression and Scientology and suicide on that issue. But first, on the Kelly thing. Oh, hey, thanks, NB. I really appreciate that. So let's go ahead and let's talk about some Scientology here. Now, I have pulled up, let's see, I've got these in sort of date order here. Because, you hear, okay, well, Scientologists don't do any medicine, or Scientologists don't go to the hospital, or they don't believe in drugs, or they don't believe in medicine or something. And none of those things are actually true, broadly speaking. Okay, as a blanket statement, it's not true that Scientologists don't go to hospitals. It's not true that Scientologists don't use medicine, and it's not true that Scientologists avoid surgery or doctors or anything like that. They go all the time. In fact, they love chiropractors, and that they're doctors as far as Scientologists are concerned. It's a more of a sort of a institutional distrust of institutionalized medicine, of doctors who Hubbard used to refer to as quacks and medicos, and people who didn't know what they were talking about. He was very derogatory about the medical field in general, especially psychiatry, but really all medicine. He said basically that they were, well, he said a lot of things, so let's go ahead and go over some of them. I just really pulled a bunch of stuff about cancer specifically, but it's what I want to get across with all of these quotes, or talk about with you about this, is as an attitude. More so than here's where Hubbard says never go to the hospital, right? It doesn't say that. There's an attitude about what Dianetics and Scientology are capable of doing. And that in Scientology, the most fundamental belief, the one thing that you have to take on faith in Scientology, is that you are a spiritual entity or a spiritual being. You're a ghost, you're a spirit, you're a soul. But in Scientology, they call this a thetan. And you have lived billions of years, millions and millions and billions of lives of bodies that you've had, and they've grown and they've died, and they've died of every reason you can imagine under the sun, moon, and stars, from being blown up to getting diseases to dying of old age, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've experienced everything there is to experience. That's a very, very core tenet of Scientology. And it's important to understand that, because Scientologists don't have a this is the one life I get and I better make the best of it. They have the exact opposite viewpoint, that this life is just one of many. And really, the only reason that this life has any real significance or is important at all, is at all different from the billions of other lives you've led, is because this time you got Scientology. You happenstanced, you randomly lucked out, and you discovered Scientology. And this is the thing that's going to be your ticket out of this endless repetitive cycle of life after death after life after death. And that is the hope that Scientology offers. And it's a big hope. And when people really kind of grok that, really understand that at its core, then you really get the Scientology mindset that your body isn't that important. And, excuse me, even more to the point, you can change the physical manifestation of what's going on with your body or the real world around you through your beliefs, through your ideas. It's not even considered a belief in Scientology. It's called a postulate. It's a sort of a thought, or a reality that you create by thinking something without any counter thought or any negativity, any, like instead of saying, oh yeah, I'd love to win the lottery, but the chances are better that I would get hit by lightning while being eaten by a shark, right? I mean, those are the chances of me winning the lottery. So I guess, haha. But you can't win if you don't play, so I'll go buy some tickets. That's not a postulate. That's the exact opposite of a postulate. A postulate is, I am buying this lottery ticket and I am winning this lottery. Right? Like this is my intention. This is what's going to happen. And the theory in Scientology is that if you can postulate something strongly enough, if you can will it into being, then by not allowing any counter thought or any counter effort or counter intention in your mind, in your head, then you will have what you want. It's sort of an ultimate manifestation of the what's that called? The secret, right? The law of attraction. It's kind of a big manifestation of that on steroids. So the postulate thing is really, really key to understanding the Scientology mindset. And I don't know that I've stressed it a whole lot before, so I'm stressing it now here today, that this is the way that Scientologists believe that they can change reality itself. And in fact, they all buy into the idea from Hubbard that all of this was created by postulates. A thetan creates by postulates. And so if you don't like your condition, you can change your condition if you can postulate it that way. And the big key, of course, is the big if, is how do you possibly put out or put forward a positive postulate with no counter intention? Well, that's the whole point of doing the levels of Scientology and paying all that money and doing all those auditing levels, is to remove all the things from your past experiences that has affected you up to now that is responsible for all the counter intentions and counter postulates that you make. You've been implanted, hypnotized, trained, indoctrinated over all the trillennia that you've lived to counter intend your own postulates. That's how you were cut off at the knees spiritually. So I'm only explaining all of this to make it real clear why Scientologists get into a mindset where they believe that they can spiritually, or through their belief or ideas, can manifest real physical change in the real world. They don't think that that's some kind of allegory or simile or metaphor. They believe it literally. And they wouldn't be doing Scientology if they thought otherwise. This is from the bottom to the top, from the most, high paying whales, all the way down to the person who is just discovering Scientology and is being, told, hey man, you can change your life and this is how you do it. They buy into this. And this is like I said, it's real law of attraction kind of stuff. So that's the most fundamental thing about Scientology, I think, that I could get across to people as to why Scientologists get into some pretty odd headspaces when it comes to medicine or being cured of something or having illness, is they believe that everything that happens in your life and in especially with your body is a manifestation of of your spiritual condition, and that if you were well off spiritually, if you were in really good shape spiritually, then your body of course would be a reflection of that. And of course that's not has nothing to do with reality, but that's what Scientologists believe. Okay, so that being said, the next thing I want to get across as a basic point of understanding about Scientology is that auditing is the way that you handle the past stresses and traumas of your life, all the way back, this life and, the life you led 1,000,000,000,000 years ago. Auditing is the only way to address that trauma and handle those implants, indoctrinations, etc., that have happened to you, and take responsibility for all the bad things you've done too as a spiritual entity, because you've been a bad little Thetan. You've been naughty, and you've blown up planets, and you've committed genocide, and you've done bad things all through the trillennia that you've been around. So the auditing is supposed to get you to fess up and confess to that stuff and take responsibility for it. Now, Hubbard said the stuff that's happened to you in this lifetime is nothing. It's a pittance. It means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. He said life on Earth these days is very, very tame compared to how things have been in the past, in the distant past. So everything that's happening to you now is merely what's called a re-stimulation of things that have happened in the past that were really important and really traumatizing and very, very damaging to you, including even directly hurting you as a Thetan, because Hubbard claims that there was electronics that's been invented in the past that's been used against Thetans directly, even though that really makes absolutely no sense, because a Thetan doesn't have any physical manifestation. The Thetan is just, a Thetan is supposed to be a living entity. Oh, hey, thank you, preacher. I'll answer your question later. Star Wars franchise. So you can be heard as a Thetan too, even though it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you as a Thetan are supposed to be a spiritual entity outside of the bounds of the physical universe. Okay, so I only wanted to explain all of that to sort of set the stage. Just Preacher, no, I don't think the Star Wars franchise can be saved. Okay, good. Let's get on with this. So here are some quotes going all the way back to Dianetics on the subject of cancer. And this is kind of some of the stuff. I didn't pull every single thing Hubbard ever said about this, but I thought I would create a little trail of information for you to kind of show how things started and how Scientologists can kind of get the idea that Scientology can actually deal with a physical ailment like bad eyesight, leukemia, cancer, myopia, any number of physical issues. They believe all of these things can surrender to a spiritual approach. And here are the reasons why. Right from the book Dianetics, May 1950, Hubbard wrote, "At the present time, Dianetic research is scheduled to include cancer and diabetes. There are a number of reasons to suppose that these may be engramic in cause, particularly malignant cancer. Okay, now engrammic in cause. In Dianetics, you have engrams. These are these episodes of trauma and stress and pain in your past that affect you negatively now, according to Dianetics' pseudoscientific claptrap theory. Yes, past trauma and stress affects you, of course, but these engrams in Dianetics are supposed to be the sole cause of your physical and spiritual travails. And so by addressing the engrams, the moments of pain and unconsciousness in your past, Dianetics promises to relieve present time physical conditions. And Hubbard is saying here in the book Dianetics that they're scheduled to start researching cancer and diabetes because he says that they are engrammic. There are a number of reasons to suppose that they may be engrammic in nature, particularly malignant cancer. He goes on to say, this is remarked so that attention may be given to the possibility no tests of any kind have been made on cancer or diabetic patients, and the thought is purely theory and is not to be taken as any kind of an avowal about a cancer cure. Those diseases which were cataloged above, however, have been thoroughly tested and have uniformly yielded to Dianetic therapy. And earlier in the text, he'd listed out a bunch of stuff like bad eyesight and liver problems and, stuff like that, and said Dianetics would help cure these things. Okay, so that's May 1950. Now we move forward to 1951, and Hubbard's writing in a book called Science or Survival, and he says, and it may be discovered, okay, so in Science or Survival, in Dianetics and Science or Survival, which was the second book of Dianetics, Hubbard talks about allies and how a person can have an ally in their life, somebody who helped them during a time of trauma and stress, like their grandmother, let's say. And then they create this kind of what Hubbard calls a reactive connection with this ally, where they feel the ally sympathized with them when they were feeling bad and down. And so they form this sort of sympathetic relationship with this ally figure and can actually end up taking on the physical attributes and illnesses of the ally, because they're trying to somehow be like the ally or be the ally because the ally is a good person. Again, there's no scientific basis for any of this, but this is what he writes. He says, this is often found with a preclear who's lost an ally. Such a case is illustrative. The preclear's grandmother died of cancer of the hands. The preclear was suffering from dermatitis of the hands. It was discovered that many remarks had been made by relatives concerning how like his grandmother the preclear was. This likeness was so closely followed out by the preclear that he attempted to develop cancer of the hands, which manifested itself as dermatitis. So apparently diseases can be spiritually contagious. And you might be manifesting an illness or disability or problem of some kind because, according to Hubbard, because of an ally in your past who you were told or reminded you that you were a lot like that ally or you somehow resemble them. And so you then take on their physical pains and problems and illnesses. Sure. Okay, again, it's just a matter of I'm laying groundwork here, right? This is what Hubbard told Dianeticists and Scientologists back in the day, and they bought this stuff. They thought, well, shit, this makes as much sense as anything else as to why I got dermatitis. So, great, let's run it out with Dianetics. And of course, Dianetics doesn't cure any of this stuff, but it can provide some temporary relief in the same way, that you might imagine a placebo could or something like that. I mean, there are cases where you have a, psychosomatic illness. You have illnesses that are caused by, because a person thinks their way into it. And that's a real thing. I mean, doctors know about that. But Hubbard, exaggerated that he thought 75 to 80% of all illnesses were psychosomatic in nature, which is absolutely not the case. Hey, thanks, Tamara. Thank you for that. All right, so let's get to the next quote. And this is where Hubbard starts changing his tune a little bit. And this is November 1953. And there was controversy within the world of Dianetics by this point, because Hubbard's cures or claims of cures was provoking the FDA and various other government agencies who were not impressed by Hubbard's claims. And so there were complaints filed. There was a person arrested. There was trouble with this. Hubbard started walking these claims of cures back a little bit. But instead of saying, oh, no, 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 we don't really cure this stuff, as you'll see, he just sort of changed the framing. What he said in this lecture, and this is him talking, I'll read this as best I can here. He said, okay, but when you as an auditor start to get interested in atoms, molecules, in the form of anatomy which is malformed to the point of a psychosomatic illness, why, you've got real trouble on your hands. You're in the wrong bin, doing the wrong thing. I don't care how many pleas are laid in your lap. I don't care how many checks are put in your bank account. You're just going to beat yourself to pieces if you consistently and continually audit at a psychosomatic illness, or audit at a pair of glasses, or audit at a ruined leg or something like that. You see, or audit at diabetes or cancer or anything. You're in the wrong bin. You're in the wrong field. You want to do something about these things that's practical and accepted and so forth, go over into the field of medicine and bungle there. But don't think you're going to produce results in terms of Scientology and the human energy unit, which can be called a thetan or a soul or a Q factor or a causation point or a U or any, I don't care what you call it or what name you put to it. You're not dealing with that the second that you're dealing with something as utterly, stupidly sordid as this stuff called atoms, molecules. And when you start to deal in atoms and molecules formed up as medical anatomy, when you start dealing with that, you're almost down the chute. And it's like trying to fix a huge tractor with a little pair of electrical pliers or something, you know? That's the only tool you're going to use, and this is all we're going to address. And then the only things we're going to have anything to do with on the tractor, of course, are just those things which this little tiny tool which you've selected, which it touches, which would probably be the tips of the ignition wires or something of the sort. And if the back wheel is off the tractor, you'd be in about the same boat in trying to fix it with these little tiny pliers and the ignition wires. I mean, you just can't get further from fact. I couldn't impress this on you enough. You just couldn't get further from doing anything. You might as well go down to the corner and loaf because practically nothing is going to happen. In the first place, if you go to deal with therapy, if we must introduce such a word, the only therapeutic agent in this universe or any other is the human soul, the beingness, the thetan, the spirit, the individual, the causation point. Well, whatever phrase you want, but it's that thing that is the therapeutic agent. To then relegate it to being a therapeutic agent when its highest role is creativeness, you see, let's just fall all the way downstairs. Let's get completely degraded now. So, end of quote there. So Hubbard's reframing this whole thing and saying, look, we made all these, people, this is 1953. So Hubbard's written Dianetics, Science of Survival. He's written a book called What to Audit. And in there, you've got him saying that we've cured cancer in a patient. So then he comes out and goes, okay, let's walk it back a little bit and say, if you're spending your auditing time dealing with directly addressing a particular illness or problem, physical problem that the person has, then you're basically wasting your time. Excuse me. And you need to be addressing the thetan as a whole and his this is the creative being who's creating the whole universe, and you're worried about, a little tumor or a bad knee or something. What's your problem, right? Why are you doing that? That's basically making a mountain out of a molehill and ignoring, the bigger picture is sort of how he was trying to reframe it. So interesting. But then we come forward in 1956, November 29th, specifically in a lecture, again, that Hubbard gave, where he starts. Okay, now in 1956 is when Hubbard starts talking about radiation. This is 1950s. Remember, this is the Cold War. This is Russia. This is America. This is nuclear fallout. This is drills being held in schools, kids getting under their desks because the bombs could drop any moment. This is this time period where there's a real imminent threat of atomic war, and Hubbard grabs onto this and starts using it to talk about and promote Dianetics and Scientology. And he starts investigating the subject of radiation, and he writes a book called All About Radiation, which wherein he claims he was a medical doctor and stuff, or an atomic engineer, which he was neither. And he starts making some pretty wild claims about radiation. And so here's what he says here, because of course this goes right into cancer. And he says, cancer is not caused, never has been, and never will be. It is not a caused mechanism by the external environment or some physiological activity. Now, that is quite a statement. Cancer is not caused by anything you're doing. Cancer is not caused by the external environment. But certain cells of the body individuate. Okay, now this word individuate is a sort of a Scientology word for makes individual, makes into an individual. Here's a notepad of a bunch of individual pieces of paper glued together to be notepads, right? But if you individuate, you separate out from that. This is an individuated notepad, right? Or piece of paper now. So he says here, certain cells of the body individuate. I don't know how that's supposed to work, but anyway, they individuate and try to build a body when the second dynamic genetic line is blocked. Okay, second dynamic is having to do with sex. Anything having to do with sex or reproduction is the second dynamic in Scientology. So he says certain cells of the body individuate and try to build a body when the second dynamic genetic line is blocked. They say, we cannot go on from here. We cannot have any babies. There cannot be any more of this. And therefore, we, completely independent of the body and its activities, must create a cellular entity. So this is Hubbard saying that some individual cells are basically breaking away from the rest of the body and going off their own way. And they proceed to do so. And that is cancer. It always requires a second dynamic or sexual upset, such as the loss of children or some other mechanism to bring about a condition known as cancer. Not going to get super judgmental here myself. I think this is all nonsense. But in the world of Scientology, somebody could read this and look at the Travolta family and think, oh, Kelly might have, pulled this in. It always requires a second dynamic or sexual upset. This is cancer at the outset. I have examined too many cases not to have recognized this, because it is present in every single case that had cancer that I've ever examined. Well, it must be true then. Real wild curve on the second dynamic. Okay, again, we're having to do with sex. And where we have helped a case with cancer, we have processed such things as wasting babies and accepting babies, and mocking up babies and throwing them away and doing such like and so on. And we have had a considerable change in the condition of the case. Now, here he's referring to a kind of auditing where where the auditor tells the pre-clear, mock up a baby. And the pre-clear just sits there and sort of imagines a baby. And then the auditor says, good, now waste it, which means get rid of it. And so the pre-clear imaginarily makes the baby disappear or throws it in a trash bin or makes it dissolve or whatever the pre-clear does to manifest getting rid of the baby. And then the auditor would have him mock up another baby or another one, or mock up 10 babies and split them up and put 5 over here and 5 over there. Okay, good. Waste 5 of them. Okay, make another 5. Good. And they could go on and on like this for hours. This is old style Scientology auditing. And this is what he's referring to here with this mocking up and wasting away babies. And he says here, again, I'm just quoting straight from Hubbard here. However, a person can get so far gone that he can hardly be processed or not processed at all. And when this is the case, why the cancer gets him. Well, now, strontium-90, radioactive element, right? Strontium-90 may or may not do anything except inform the bone cells. This is the end of track, brother, because somebody has invented and is using radiation on this planet. So Hubbard had a big thing about radiation being something that was used on other planets, and the reason it's such a problem here is because of what happened on other places. So he goes into about radiation. Oh, and he says, now that's what cancer is all about. It isn't a strange sickness. It is the effort on the part of a few cells to not surrender and to go off and make a pattern of their own in any way, shape, or form they can. Therefore, you must demonstrate to somebody that it is not the end of track. And if you can demonstrate to somebody that radiation does not mean end of track, if you can break up that identification, you evidently can break up the total effect of radiation upon the human body. If you can break up that identification, you've done it. Now, it's quite interesting to be aware of this. That is a triumph in itself. Okay, so translation, if you can deal with the restimulative effects of radiation, then radiation might have a positive effect on a person, say, receiving chemotherapy. But if you don't deal with that, if a person goes and gets chemotherapy and is receiving radiation therapy, chemotherapy is chemical therapy, but it's combined with the radiation therapy. If you get radiation therapy and the body starts thinking, oh, now's the time to die, because every time in the past, remember what I said at the beginning, it's all contingent upon the spiritual reality of the pre-clear, right? It's not about physicality. It's not about disease. It's not about, cells suddenly, going out of control. That's all just a manifestation of the spiritual problem. And the spiritual problem is that you've lived before in societies that had radiation. When radiation appeared, societies ended because they blew themselves up in atomic fire. And that same thing could be happening now, where you run into this and you got cancer and now you got to deal with it, but it's radiation and that restimulates you and therefore you die. But if you get auditing and deal with this, then apparently you have a fighting chance with cancer treatment. Okay, that's kind of what he was saying there. Pretty wild stuff. But again, feeds into this whole bottom line idea that you as a spirit are the one who's in charge of what's going on with your body. Okay. So yeah, then we have niacin, which is supposed to run out radiation, and that's why it's part of that whole purification program. Another quote from 1958 now. Hubbard says, this was from August 1st, 1958. We have run this with a person lying in bed, sick with a temperature, waiting an ambulance, and cured his cancer. We'll have to edit this off the tape because it's not proper to cure cancer. It's frowned on. We didn't audit him just to cure his cancer, but just to make him feel a little better. By the time he arrived where he was going and got his diagnosis from the medicos and so forth, he no longer had cancer. Okay. And just to give a little bit more information I thought was kind of fun and interesting on this is there was also, those are just some pull quotes that I pulled from over time. We're going to get into the more modern or present time attitude of the church about medical and health. But let me give you this from L. Ron Hubbard's son. I actually found this also in the Hustler interview that he did. This was L. Ron Hubbard Jr. And here is his quote from that interview. He said, quite simply, according to my father, cancer is basically cells that are dividing out of control. And so, according to my father, the problem is a sexual thing. Remember that quote earlier from 56. Therefore, the cancer is rooted in a sexual problem. If you have cancer, you are really screwed up on sex. So, what would happen in this auditing? I don't know what it's like now, but it's probably just the same as in the old days, is that they would address a guy's entire sex life. There was certainly an incredible preoccupation in Dianetics and Scientology about sex was a great means of control. You have complete control of someone if you have every detail of his sex life and fantasy life on record, which is true. You do. And one of the, and you know, so for those of you, yeah, that was yeah, I think it was Quentin. It was L. Ron Hubbard Jr. I think it was Nibs. I'm remembering right. Sorry. No, I might have gotten that one wrong. Ah, all right, we can look that one up. I am not finding that off the top of my head here. Okay. Now, yes, now we come up to getting back onto this track of how Scientology has been dealing with medical problems or illnesses. So those kind of quotes that I was just reading you, I really want to just kind of give you those to sort of set the stage for how Scientologists get into a mindset where they think that they can spiritually deal with real physical problems or physical illnesses or even terminal illnesses, okay? Those kind of quotes, those kind of things from Hubbard give people the idea and the hope that auditing can handle their physical problems and they don't have to go to the doctor, you see. So this is where this attitude comes from amongst Scientologists that I don't like doctors. I don't want to go see doctors. They just stick needles in you and they don't really know what they're talking about. And it really, the problem is a spiritual problem. So what I need auditing. This is where this attitude comes from. This is not also helped at all by the fact that also in the 60s, Hubbard developed this whole PTSD thing, where any kind of accident or illness that you have is a direct result of you being PTS, which means you're connected to a suppressive person. So there's that whole pile of nonsense that also gets thrown onto the top of this. All through the 1950s, there was no PTS thing or suppressive people. That wasn't Hubbard's thing. It was about, you know, rehabilitating you spiritually, and that will fix your body and fix all your problems, and everything will be great. Then in the 60s comes the SP stuff with the PTS thing, and now we just have to de-PTS you. And there's that whole body of work, which did not cancel or nullify any of this stuff that he said in the 50s. You have to, this is where integrating this stuff becomes difficult because you go, well, wait a minute. And I thought it was cancer cells. I thought that was cells individuating because of a sexual problem. But now you're telling me that there's a suppressive person and that's the reason I'm sick. And you have, and in trying to, like, you know, walk yourself through this and figure it all out, you kind of figure, okay, well, maybe that is happening, but that's only, you know, the cancer cells are only going out of control because of my sexual problems. But that's only happening because I somehow ran into an SP in my life. And so I'm being suppressed. And that's what made me more susceptible to that, you know, the re-stimulation that caused the cancer. Like, you see what I mean? You got to bridge these very different concepts and ideas in order to make them kind of make some kind of sense. And they don't really make a lot of sense, is the problem. And this is why Scientologists get their heads a little screwy about whether they should or shouldn't go to a doctor or should or shouldn't take medicine, is they have these conflicting, you know, sort of double binds going around in their heads. Then on top of that, okay, I'm just checking with you guys, and let's see. You guys, there are some great comments that are wildly off topic. Okay, good. So then in 1969, legal really started catching up with Scientology. I mean, Hubbard had already in the 50s kind of put the kibosh on claims of cures unless he made them in lectures. But then organizationally, you could see they started walking some stuff back. And in 1969, you have here a couple of bulletins that were published in July, which I thought might be of interest to you guys. One of them, he says here, you can have an item come up of a seriously physically ill condition. Okay, you got a pre-clear who in his auditing comes up as seriously physically ill. Like the E-meter says that that's what's going on with the guy, you know, based on this this procedure that gets followed. And if this is what comes up, then it's handled as follows: 1, medical examination; 2, medical care; 3, auditing composed of the following. And he then lists out a whole paragraph of a bunch of stuff, including touch assist, contact assist, stuff you guys might have been familiar with, as well as a whole bunch of very technical terms to describe a whole bunch of other auditing procedures that you could do. And Hubbard says this isn't even a program, it's just a list of a lot of things to do. It would not greatly matter what order they were done in, but lighter actions should be the earlier. The idea with auditing a physically ill pre-clearance Scientology, according to these later issues, is you want to take it light because the guy is traumatized physically. He's tired. He's not in a good way. So you only want to do light forms of auditing on the person until you build them up and they start getting a bit better and stronger, and then you can go in on the tougher modes of auditing. And of course, the reason, the real world reason for that is because if somebody is ill, their energy level is low because it's the body is using its energy to fight this. And auditing is a very thought-intensive activity. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but just in your day-to-day activity, your brain is using 30% of your body's energy budget just to keep itself going. The brain takes a lot of energy. And when you start working it, like you do when you're auditing, you're detracting from the energy that your body could be using to heal itself in order to imagine all the nonsense that you're running off in auditing. So Hubbard even recognized that this could be a problem and said, okay, light auditing, not heavy stuff. As a pre-C who is ill is easily made an effect, the auditing sessions should be smoothly done and each session relatively short. Okay, and then I thought you might find this of interest. This was literally published 3 days later, 27 July 1969. It's called Antibiotics, and this is not cancer related directly, but it does speak to this whole thing I'm laying down here. Hubbard said, a PC on antibiotics should be given Dianetic auditing. Very often, antibiotics do not function unless the illness or injury is also audited. Very often, he says. Wow, quite a claim, huh? The basic failures of antibiotics apparently stem from a traumatic condition which prevents the medical treatment from functioning. When a person is medically treated for an illness, it is best to back up the action with auditing. Sometimes the patient is too ill to be fully audited. It is difficult to audit someone who is running a temperature. In such a case, let the antibiotics bring the temperature down before auditing. But if the temperature does not come down, in the interest of the patient's recovery, auditing should be done. It is usually too late when the patient is in a coma, but one can still reach a patient who is unconscious by touching the patient's hands to parts of the bed with feel that object. You literally grab the person, the guy's laying in a coma in a hospital bed, you take his hand and you say, feel that bed, and you put his hand on the bed. And then you wait a second and you go, good. Feel that hospital gown, and you move the guy's hand onto the hospital gown. You're literally giving the guy commands and acting as though he is accepting them or following them. A patient will sometimes respond to commands even when unconscious if you tell them to squeeze your hand to acknowledge they have done the command. Years ago, the auditing of unconscious persons was worked out and successfully done. And then he gives, a post-operative auditing. A person who has been operated on medically or dentally, or has just delivered a child, should have the engram audited out as soon as possible. The engram being the memory of the traumatic episode of pain and unconsciousness that the person just experienced. So Hubbard's saying you got to audit that stuff as quick as it's been done. And the first thing is get the medical treatment, audit them as soon as possible on the illness or injury, and audit them again when they are well, and et cetera, et cetera. All this comes under the heading of saving lives. Believe this guy? At the very least, it saves slow recovery and bad after effects and resultant psychosomatic illnesses. Dianetics is the first development since the days of Rome that changes and improves the rate of healing. And he puts that in all big capital letters. Dianetics is also the first development that removes traumatic barriers from the path of healing. Medicines and endocrine compounds quite often are effective in the presence of Dianetic auditing, which were once inexplicably ineffective in many cases. The barrier to healing was the engram. With that removed, healing can occur. Okay, so again, you see the mixed messaging here, and the way that Hubbard talks about how it's really all spiritual, and Dianetics is, is the way to address these engrams, but get medical treatment too. But if the medical treatment's not working, it's because you need auditing. I mean, it's always comes back to Dianetics and Scientology as the ultimate solution. But now they're saying, go get medical treatment first. So, you see how this puts people in some pretty weird headspaces when they're trying to figure out for themselves as Scientologists, what should they do? It's not super clear, Okay, so let's go ahead to a couple more quotes that I've pulled here. I hope these are shedding some light on why Scientology's, why their heads are so screwed up on this, and why it's been so hard for me, Aaron, Leah, Mike, all of us to try to easily explain what Scientology thinks about medicine and doctors and cures, because it's a little all over the place, Okay. Now, okay. Then, also in 1969, I thought I would read you guys this. Yeah, this is June 69. So again, right around the same time that other stuff I just read you. Hubbard wrote, as a matter of policy for the churches, and as far as I know, if you walk into a Scientology organization today, you will see these two signs on the wall. They used to be on the walls when I was there. And it's according to this policy that these signs be posted. Okay, so here's what they say. A sign should be prominently displayed in all orgs servicing the general public as follows. Quote, if you have come here to be cured of a physical illness, see the registrar and so inform her so that she can arrange a competent medical examination and treatment and for Dianetic auditing while under the care of a doctor. When you are physically well, you can begin Scientology training and processing on your road to total freedom. Okay, that's one sign. And another sign, quote, this organization will not recommend or condone political mental treatment such as electric shocks or brain operations or convulsive drugs, and condemns utterly this fascist approach to mental health by extermination of the insane. Because we will not agree to brutality and murder under the guise of mental healing, or to the easy and lawless seizure of persons in the name of mental health for political reasons, we are fought ceaselessly by those who seek domination of this country through mental treatment. You are safe so long as we live. Okay, that's the other sign. Usually these two things hang in the sales area. That's where the registrars are. The registrar is to sign the person up as he or she would any pre-clear. Okay, so take their money. Have them sign the forms. They've read the signs here that this is, take their money. And then he says here, the org must make a liaison with a medical clinic which has diagnostic equipment and obtain a flat rate charge. I never saw that get done. Legally and ethically, it is all right to send a person to a doctor for a physical examination. But it will cause an upset with the doctor to specify what he is to do in that examination. I'm translating a little bit there. It is best to say merely, would you please do a complete medical examination to include any acute or chronic illness and any effects from past injury or illness? Okay, so that is the policy of the church right now. As far as I know, that policy is still extant for somebody who comes in, whether existing Scientologist or new Scientologist. This is how they get treated. Yeah, we'll take your money. We'll definitely sell you auditing. But if you're sick, we are going to send you to a doctor to get that checked out. Okay, and in terms of being really physically ill, right? It's not a flu or a cold or something like that. Okay. Policy is not to engage on auditing sick PCs without medical advice or treatment as required. That's what puts it there pretty clearly, okay? So, yeah. All right. So just kind of checking in here. Oh, ex-Scientologist asks, how many assists are there and what are their names? There's a book this thick of them. That's new. It is. It came out with Golden Age Tech Phase 2. It's called the Assists Handbook, and it's huge. There are hundreds of assists. Touch assists and contact assists and nerve assists are the 3 most commonly used ones, but there are tons and tons and tons of them. And whole programs get written, and hours and hours and hours of pre-clears paid time is used doing these assists. Okay. So now I went to one last thing, which gets specific for OTs. You know, I mentioned before, OTs are being addressed by handling their body thetans. And there's a lot of procedures, just like there's lots of different assists and lots of different kinds of auditing procedures. There are lots of different procedures for addressing what ails you or what's traumatizing you as an OT. You get up the levels of Scientology past the level of clear, and you're no longer supposed to have this reactive mind that contains all these, collections of past episodes of trauma and stress and pain and unconsciousness. All that's supposed to be gone, and yet there's still stuff to address. Well, that's because you have all these body thetans stuck to you, and they're causing you problems. And you don't even know they're causing you problems because you just hear voices and you think it's your voice, when you hear voices in your head and stuff. No, those are your body thetans. And they wake up and talk to you and think thoughts and do things to your body, and they can mess with you. And a big reveal of OT3 is that you've got these things and that they're there and you got to get rid of them. And it's going to take you years because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them stuck to you. Ugh, space cooties. So how do these things get dealt with? Well, like I said, there's lots and lots of different ways. And in 1979, there's a bulletin called Auditing Somebody Under Constant and Continuous Present Time Stress. Okay? And this is for OTs. This is not for your lower level people. All the stuff that we've been talking about so far has been stuff for people who are lower level for the most part. When you get into the OT levels, you have to start dealing with these BTs. And of course, they don't talk about the BTs at the lower levels because it's all confidential. This is a confidential reference I'm about to go over with you, where Hubbard describes a PC or pre-OT living in a dangerous environment or under continuous present time stress. PT says present time stress is subject to the rudiments going out between sessions and is subject to continuous restimulation. Okay, got to explain one more little concept to you here about auditing, and that is the rudiments. I've managed to avoid a lot of this technical talk over the years, but, rudiments. Okay, before you can do an auditing session at any level, lower level, upper level, any level, okay? Any pre-clear, anytime, anywhere. You're going to have to do the rudiments. And rudiments means rudimentary, basic, fundamental. And rudiments in an auditing session are those things that could be on a pre-clear's mind that could be distracting him from the auditing session. So the first thing you got to do when you start an auditing session is make sure that the rudiments are in. That's what they call it, that the rudiments are checked and to make sure that the person doesn't have his attention elsewhere. And rudiments are things like an upset, which they call an ARC break, an affinity reality communication break. You know, you're upset. You got pissed off at your wife before you came to the session and you had a big fight. And then you had to leave and she's pissed and you're pissed and you come to the session and you're going to get auditing, but you can't even think about the auditing because you're thinking about this problem with your wife, this upset that you had with her. Or another kind of rudiment is a present time problem. You know, you just before you came for the auditing, or maybe yesterday, you got some tax bill and it's $10,000 and you don't know how you're going to pay it. And Jesus fucking Christ, you know, so you have a present time problem. It's right here, right now, and you're completely distracted by it. Well, you can't easily have an auditing session where you're going to put your attention 10 million years down the time track if you're stuck thinking about this bill you just got. So the rudiments are an attempt in auditing to find and address these kinds of issues and get the rudiments in, is what they call it. Okay, so they check for, do you have an ARC break? And they look at the meter. And if the meter responds, okay, do you have an ARC break? Yeah, I had this problem with my wife. Okay, good, blah, 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 blah. Talk about. And if it doesn't resolve, then you go for an earlier, similar ARC break, right? It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, so I had this fight with my wife tonight, and it really sucked, and she's pissed, and I'm pissed, and I'll probably have to go home, and I don't know what's going to happen when I go home. And the auditor goes, okay, cool. And they do a little procedure with that, and if that doesn't resolve it, then they'll go, is there an earlier similar ARC break? And yeah, there was a time I fought with my wife a year ago, and it was really bad, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, good. Yeah, wow, we fight all the time. I can fix this. It's all good. And the needle's floating and the person's happy and they can get on with their auditing session. Okay? The idea is not necessarily to resolve the problem. It's not like you pay the tax bill. You just get your attention off it so that you can have an auditing session. That's the idea with the rudiments. Hubbard says that if a person is under stress, then these rudiments will go out between sessions. You can have a session, you know, you handle the rudiments, and then you take a break. Maybe it's an hour break, maybe it's a day break. And then the guy comes back for another session, and the same problem is sitting there again, right? Because it's a continuous present time stress, okay? This is what he's talking about. So he says, under such circumstances, one can only audit in the direction of destimulation and handling that which is already in restimulation. To stir up anything else on the case adds to what is already in restimulation and would worsen the case condition. I hope I'm explaining this well enough. The idea is that if if the person's in a state of overwhelm, you know, and they're not there with you, ready to do the auditing, then there could be problems and you could actually make the person worse by not addressing these rudiments. So that's why this is really important. He says already, a person who's already in a state of overwhelm, any error in the auditing or any further restimulation could make the person ill or go into a spin, meaning he could actually go nuts. Into a spin in Scientology means the person goes crazy. So, yeah. Okay, and oh yeah, then there's another layer of complication with this, which ex-Scientologist is bringing up in the comments here, which I'll address as well, which has to do, he says here, didn't LRH, or I don't know, it's a he or she, didn't LRH say that bodies had a genetic line that Thetans tended to pick up based on their past overts, including bodies of a certain race, making them have their own physical/mental problems? Yeah, he said that too. Just to add another layer of complexity on top of this. Your body, the genetic line, the reproductive line that has created your body has its own problems and issues too. And so the Thetan, you as a Thetan come along, you're not you didn't occupy the body of your father or your grandfather or your great grandfather. You were off in some other country, or you were off doing some other thing. So you come and grab this body, and now you have a whole genetic line that's also affecting your body. Yeah. So anyway, not going to get too much more into that, but oh, and Kiva Go is asking about the Paul Haggis thing. I talked about that at the beginning of this episode, so rewind to the beginning of the show because we talked about that. Okay. So hence, one may not audit a PC, reading from Hubbard again, one may not audit a PC under heavy stress, or a PC who is ill on a major rundown, nor on an advanced program. The auditing of cases in this condition must be accurate and flawless. The program and CSing must parallel the PC's mind and must be in the direction of handling what has already been stirred up in life. High-powered techniques, such as those used on the OT levels, if incorrectly used, could easily plunge the PC in even deeper. But without auditing, a person living in a dangerous environment and under constant stress is only likely to get worse. If the person is sick as well as being subjected to a dangerous environment, there would be no hope of recovery without auditing. And the auditing must be powerful enough to not only keep up with the day-to-day stress and restimulation, but also to make rapid headway toward recovery. So Hubbard's sort of positing this push-pull problem of the person's life is destroying them and restimulating them and making things difficult, and they're sick, and you want to audit this person, but how do you even begin? But you have to, because the person won't get better without auditing. Push, pull, what do you do, right? And Hubbard said, I recently solved this dilemma. With remarkable success, the routine is developed as both safe and powerfully effective. It resulted in a remarkable resurgence and recovery for a PC who was physically ill, under heavy constant stress, and living in a dangerous environment. This tech is vital, right? And he says here, a person who is under constant, and I'm reading this, I thought, because, if you're wondering, well, what did they do with Kelly? Well, I don't know. I have no idea if they did any auditing with Kelly at all. But I dug this up because I thought, well, let's find out what would they have done if they did audit her. Probably this, I think. But, who knows? Somebody could have taken something else and done something else with it to her instead. Or maybe she was getting no auditing at all. But considering that she, as hardcore of a Scientologist as she was, as true believer as she was, and as this issue exists and these techniques exist, this is probably the kind of thing that was done or could be done with somebody who was in her condition. Okay, so that's why I'm throwing this out there. I'm not trying to say this is what happened to Kelly. I want to be super clear about that. Okay, please make sure that you interpret that correctly, because that's kind of important. Okay, so Hubbard said we're going to talk about the rudes a little bit, the rudiments. Okay, in Scientology they call them rudes, R-U-D-S. The rudes. Oh, did you get your rudes flown? Are your rudes in? How are your rudes? That's how they usually talk about it. And it says here, Hubbard says, a person who is under constant PT stress or who is living in a dangerous environment is subject to restimulation and life knocking the rudes out. Okay, so you go in session, you put the rudes in, but then life knocks them out again. Therefore, particular attention must be paid to keeping the rude in any auditing done on such a person. The action of flying rudes, oh yeah, and when you check all the rudiments in an auditing session, that means you're flying the rudes. You're getting the rudiments to float. The needle floats, right? So you want to get them. You want to get these rudiments flying. Okay, so the action of flying rudes alone is beneficial and assists the person by getting recent and present time mental image pictures, basically, off the case. I'm translating a little bit as I go because I'm already translating so much, and I don't want to weigh you guys down with any more terminology. It's already bad enough. Yeah, it's also very essential that the roods are flown each session because auditing over out roods could be enough to spin a case in this condition. Okay. A person who is under stress or sick cannot usually be audited on anything heavy, nor on major actions or programs. The worse off the case or person is, the lighter the approach you must make in CSing and auditing. There's already too much stress and restimulation, and the idea is to get what is already in restimulation keyed out or handled, not to stir up anything else. A person under stress or who is sick should not be audited for as long as the person's attention span and stamina are lower than usual. Any session should be short sessioned and ended on the first win or relief for the PC, regardless of whether the CS for the session has been completed. Okay? So I only wanted to read that much, actually, because I wanted to give you guys the idea that if Kelly was getting auditing, it was probably of a very light nature, addressing her concerns and problems with the illness itself, any worry or stress over who she'd be leaving behind if she were to die, losses, problems, issues with that. That's kind of probably where the auditing was going, okay? As opposed to some deep dive to get her to cure her cancer. There are things you can do with an OT to address physical problems. There's a thing here. Hubbard talks about unburdening. In one session, charge is gotten off by flying the roods and additionally by blowing any BT or cluster who had that out rood. So let's say you got this upset and then you deal with that rudiment, that upset. And now you're going to look for any BT who has that same upset from that spirit's past lives. And you telepathically identify it, get in communication with that body Thetan, and then, basically by waking him up and running out his little upset, you blow him off and he takes off and he gets to go get his own body now. And since there's thousands and thousands of these BTs stuck to you, you could have quite a few of these things to deal with. So these kind of losses or upsets is another thing that they might use. And personally, sitting here describing this to you and thinking about this, I just think to myself, man, what a tremendous waste of time and money and energy, right? I mean, now we're going to not only deal with my, if I was the one who was sick and I was an OT, not only are we going to deal with my concerns and problems, but now I'm going to make up a whole nother set of problems that are similar to those that some imaginary creature that's living on me is experiencing, and I'm gonna flick him away and have him go off and do his own thing. I mean, and to spend hours doing this crap, this is the kind of stuff that goes on the OT levels. And this would be with an auditor, by the way. This would not be done solo. I make this hand motion because they have the cans that they hold in one hand while they operate an e-meter when they're doing solo auditing. This kind of auditing would not be done solo. It would be done by an auditor, even if you're OT. Blah, 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 works on you unburden in one session, becomes available for handling the next day. Yeah, so, okay, so there's an example set of sessions here. I thought I might walk through them I'll try to do this quickly, but I thought it might be of interest. I don't know. I hope I'm not boring the hell out of you guys. I find my roots watching Pornhub. Yeah. Okay. So first session, first day. The auditor begins flying the rudiments. Not all roods were flown as the PC brightened up and had a win on spotting the source of an upset. None of the roods flown in this session read as belonging to a BT, okay, a body Thetan. Time, 10 minutes. So you have a 10-minute session in one day. Second session on the first day. This session was begun with flying the roods. The first roods flown did not read as belonging to a BT and were taken, to FN. Present time problem went earlier similar to whole track medical treatment, like treatment that happened prior to this lifetime. And a postulate, remember postulates? Let's not forget about those postulates. They're the things that are holding all of this stuff in place. So in auditing, OTs are especially keen to find postulates. And here they found a postulate that it was better to die than get medical treatment. And they, had some realization about that. So apparently the idea with this pre-clear was that they had made a postulate that it's better to die than have to get medical treatment. And so they spotted this postulate, and so therefore shouldn't have to be suffering from the adverse effects of it anymore. And you've made millions of postulates in your past, so it's not like blowing one of them is going to get rid of all the problems that you're having. But this is what came up in the session. Then they did some other things. The BT, they found that while they ran something with a BT, overran a little bit, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, then they have another session on the third day. The first action in the session was to check the area of the body from which the BT was blown in the last session. And this was not reading on the E-meter, so they moved on. Yeah, 36-minute session that day. Roods were flown on the fourth day. Did a couple little things, 16-minute session. So these are short sessions, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes is, is a pretty long session for this kind of stuff. So, yeah, okay. So those are the kinds of things that they might be running on a sick OT in order to try to get them better. Okay? And with all of that, that's kind of all the research I did on this. Yeah, realization equals cognition. That's right. So, Jim Carrey's BT prank phone call to Celebrity Center. Oh, didn't hear about that one. Okay, but anyway, that's a little bit deep dive into what Scientology actually, what Hubbard wrote on the subject of medicine and illness and disease and how do you deal with it. And I've never done a deep dive like this before, pulling up all these quotes and going over them with you guys. But I thought, well, this is as good a time as any to talk about this stuff. Again, I've got nothing but sorrow and compassion for John Travolta right now and his family in this moment of loss. And I don't say any of this stuff to try to make less of their loss. But, I am not in any way going to say that this Scientology nonsense that Hubbard wrote here is at all effective or conducive to, helping somebody who is sick. Certainly not somebody who has cancer. And this stuff only distracts from actual treatment that a person could be and should be getting. And apparently Kelly did get treatment in a hospital in Texas. The one thing about this stuff, these quotes and everything that I'm reading to you, or that you can dig up in the books and lectures of Scientology, is that it tends to, what I noticed most of all when I was in Scientology was that people tended to put off going and getting actual medical examinations and treatment until the last minute. And there was a woman who had cancer on the RPF that I was on. Needless to say, she was not keeping up with the physical demands of the program. She was exhausted all the time because she was getting chemo. And she was getting FPRD. They weren't doing any of this stuff with her. They were delivering false purpose rundown auditing on her, which means they were going after those evil intentions, which could also be called evil postulates. And they were just getting her through her RPF program and doing assists on her. So she wasn't even really getting the full illness treatment, and she was being run on stuff that was definitely way too heavy for her. The evil purpose auditing is pretty heavy stuff in Scientology. It's hard to do. And so they were violating, Hubbard's own writings here as to how to deal with her. I mean, hell, the fact that she even got cancer should have gotten her off the RPF. I mean, the fact that, it's hard to, it's even hard for me with these memories to remember how I was ever okay with something like that, I really don't know how I got myself in a headspace where it was okay with me that somebody who had cancer was on a physically, you know, hard labor program. I mean, wow. Anyway, there was another couple Scientologists, in fact, three of them I know, who died of cancer, Sea Org members. Each one of them did not get treatment or waited till the last minute to get treatment, and they're forced to come to their cancer where it possibly could have been beaten if they had started getting treatment earlier, but instead they treated it with this Dianetics and Scientology crap. Robert asks here, if you have a 15-minute session, does the church bill you for a full hour? No, they don't. They bill you for 15 minutes. Plus the admin time, the time it takes for the auditor to write up all the paperwork for the session. That also gets billed, I think, half the time. So if you spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes, if you spend 10 minutes writing up all the paperwork for the session, then you'll get billed for 5 minutes on that time also. But they just keep a running record on an invoice sheet and on the back of the folder as to how many minutes of auditing you have and how many you've used. And they have all that computerized now. It's very, very precise. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Why give money to doctors when you can give it to Scientology? So I haven't really totally been tracking with questions you guys have been asking me as I've been going along here, because I've been kind of on my roll here, reading all these quotes and stuff to you guys. I'm just going to thumb up here. A cis handbook. I never saw that. Yeah, look it up. It's actually, you can probably find it online. If you go to the Bridge Publications website, it's probably there. Maybe not, because they might only be offering public level material on that website, but check it out. Okay, going on along here. Yeah, I did answer the question about the assists. Can Xenu catch the COVID-19 virus? Theoretically, in his prison, wherever he's located. All right, guys, and good. Okay, so, oh, what's the attitude for surgery? Patricia asks me. Well, if it's necessary, then you're going to have it. If it's possible, you know, this is where the individual Scientologist thing comes out, because some Scientologists will opt for the surgery. They're like, yes, get it. Others, you know, the attitude about it is, if it can be solved with Scientology, it should be. It must be. And in fact, every reference Hubbard gave here, he never said otherwise. He didn't, you know, he said auditing, you know, the medical treatment might not work without the auditing. You know, and he said now the auditing isn't going to really work so well if you have a seriously ill pre-clear. So you got to get that addressed too. You know, auditing isn't going to reach in and fix a broken leg, and it's not going to remove a tumor. So if you need surgery, you need surgery. But at the same time, if you dive deep enough into these references that I read you and believe hard enough, then you could make a case in your own head as to why you don't need surgery, and Scientology alone will put your spirit in such mega superhero shape that you'll be able to just get rid of those, you know, cancerous cells or whatever, or make your body heal that much faster because you're a supercharged super thetan. And some Scientologists get into that frame of mind. Others also get into a frame of mind where alternative therapy, non-invasive therapy, non-surgical therapy becomes their mode of choice, and they go down to Mexico and, you know, get drugs that you can't get here, or get treatments that you can't get here in other countries, for example. You know, you can go places and get stuff. So they're all about alternative therapies because they basically distrust, you know, medicine for reasons that we've gone over. So that's kind of the attitude about that. And if you guys have any other questions on the medical line for me, go ahead and throw them in the comments now, because I'm about ready to move on to the third part. And I really only have a few things to say about Benjamin Kioff's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, death. Okay, Anne Montgomery, go right into it. Is Lisa Marie still involved with Scientology? The thinking is no. This was on Tony Ortega's blog 2 days ago. He did the most thorough write-up I know on Lisa Marie's relationship with Scientology, and she very definitely got out and got her family out, a la Leah Remini. back in 2014, and I believe it was 14, he said. And she has, we don't have any indication that she ever went back in. However, her mom might have. And her son, Benjamin, apparently suicided on Sunday. And he was 27 years old. I remember when he was born. Lisa Marie was married to, I think, a guy named Riley Keough. He was a musician, still a Scientologist, still hardcore, still all in. And apparently Benjamin was depressed, suffered from depression, and took his own life tragically. And again, I feel nothing but sorrow for that, for her, and for that situation. Regardless of whether Lisa Marie is or isn't a Scientologist anymore, I just always feel bad, for tragic loss like that. Now the thing about talking about suicide is it's a very, very difficult and nuanced topic. So you are not going to see me sit here right now and say anything about how Scientology is to blame for his death, because I have no idea why he did what he did. And unless he left a note or something, nobody else, might not necessarily know either. Kind of depends on a whole lot of information that is extremely personal to that person. So I'm not going to say anything else about that specific suicide, except to say it really sucks, and it's really sad. On a broader level, on a broader note, in a general sort of way, I will say that Scientology absolutely positively does contribute to many people's depression. I know many people who are depressed or who have had depressive episodes because of their exposure to and work with or in Scientology, myself included. It's just something you go through. Leaving Scientology, leaving the Sea Org, leaving a deep, heavily, true believer mindset is very, very hard. And it changes you in ways that I don't know that it's easy to describe or easy to understand, because it's so personal to each of us. When you're all in on a belief system, and then that belief system is shown to be a complete fabrication of a madman, megalomaniac, pathological liar, there's going to be consequences to that. And it really messes with your head in very significant ways. You end up with trust issues. You end up not being able to really want to trust any other group ever again. You don't want to really, give out your hand of trust and faith in almost anything else. For it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to overcome that. And for younger people especially, I think it's harder because they don't have the life experience of the gentler hard knocks that might help prep you for something like that a little bit. They just get thrown right to the wolves with this, and that's rough. That really sucks. So could Scientology have had something to do with Benjamin's depression? If he, sure, of course it could have. Maybe it had nothing to do with it, though. I mean, let's be really clear. There's a whole life there, and who knows what the factors of his life were. But in a broad, general sense, former Scientologists or people who come out of Scientology, yeah, there is stuff to deal with. And unfortunately, Benjamin's not the only person who was involved with the Church of Scientology who came out of it and then suicided. Again, was there a direct causal relationship? Impossible to say. Was there some kind of relationship? I can certainly connect those dots. I can definitely connect those dots. So, okay. Oh, Keo, thank you for that. Okay, Keo. Okay, somebody's asking me, where can my blow story be found? A few places. I think probably the best place, if you're looking for stuff about my story, would be that interview I did on with the Mormon Stories, John DeLynn, which I posted on the front page of my YouTube channel. I think it's called My Story in Full or something. It's quite long, but if you fast forward through, you'll get to the Sea Org part, and which is probably in the second or third video and get to my whole two blow stories, actually, because I blew as a Santa Barbara staff member for a few days, and then I blew again as a Sea Org member for a couple days. So there's two blow stories there. Yeah, exactly. Somebody says here, I can't imagine what a person, ex-Scientology says, I can't imagine what a person um, must go through when they reach the highest OT levels and find that they paid so much money for bullshit. Yeah, big time, you know, big time. Why do they call it blow? I'm not sure as I sit here right now. Because you're taking off, you're leaving. It's you know, gone, vanished. They just poof, they were gone, right? I think that's where it comes from. That's how we always used to sort of think about it. Okay, so anyway, wanted to kind of throw out some words about all of this stuff. You know, this is not Scientology is not a fun, cushy rainbows and unicorns and butterflies subject. And I think these, you know, the events of the last 48 hours have shown us that they are still very much at it in terms of trying to salvage their public image. I think that the church overall, I think Miscavige's strategy is just sort of wait this whole thing out and then come up with some new exciting release at the public level and at the Scientology level and say, hey, we're still alive, we're still here, we took a kicking and we're still going, you know, sort of thing. I mean, that's the only kind of PR strategy that makes any kind of sense to me. If Miscavige has any idea of keeping Scientology going, and I'm sure he does because he's, you know, only in his, I think he just turned 60. So, you know, guy's still got many years left in him, and I think he wants Scientology to keep going. But, you know, yuck. You know, it's a yucky topic with a lot of ugly connected to it. There really isn't anything good in the middle, in the center. You know, people talk about, oh, well, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Well, go to the middle of Scientology and you find this crap. This is just, it's all nonsense, you know, and this is what people spend hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on and dedicate their lives to, you know, and it's really quite sad. So anyway, that's where it's at. That's what's up. So I thought I'd throw some commentary out about all this. Thank you very much for watching me go on at a mad rate. Thank you very much for my subscribers and supporters out there. The super chats were awesome. Really appreciated. I hope I earned them with this episode. I wanted to go over some information that I thought maybe hadn't seen the light of day. You guys hadn't really heard or seen much of. Now I can kind of point to this episode and go, well, look, if you really want to know all about Scientology's attitude about medicine and stuff, maybe this can help with that, you know? And that'll be that. And Paul's asking me, bit off topic, Chris, but did you appear in the We Stand Tall video? I did not. That was only for the int level guys. I was not in that video. Thank you, Kristen, for that super chat. Awesome, guys. And let's see. I will put out, by the way, I actually guess I should say this. There is a link below to BetterHelp, betterhelp.com, which is a sponsor for my show now and is a service that I believe in and I want to promote. Apparently best for people in the United States. People out of the United States are not necessarily having the same experience with this service as people who are in the United States. Can't, you know, I'm not going to apologize for their problems with that. You know, BetterHelp is expanding and has got to get their selves together on that, but it is still a service that I endorse. And if you are looking for any therapeutic help online, I think that's the service to use. So you can find a link to that below, betterhelp.com/Chris Shelton, if you are at all interested in getting any help of your own via online therapeutic licensed support. So that's my plug. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode. You guys have been awesome. Thank you again. And well, we will talk again tomorrow. I will be doing critical conversations right here with my wife tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And we will be taking your calls. So I hope you will join us for that because we have been having, the last couple episodes have been awesome. I really enjoyed them. And I hope that you guys will join us for those. All right. Talk to you guys soon enough. Bye bye.